Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC.
Hey, Maggie, how are you?
Hi, Christy. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very excited today. We have a guest with us, Amy Work, who has a practice here in the Charlotte area. And I've known Amy for a while now, and I've loved watching her journey with CCPT, and I can't wait for her to kind of share with you guys a little bit about her work with children who have ADHD. So welcome, Amy.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, kind of your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I originally was a high school math teacher here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I taught Algebra 1, geometry, which is now Math 1 and Math 2. And I really enjoyed being a teacher. But my favorite part was building relationships with the students. And I did that for about 4 years and then kind of decided that I wanted to switch careers. I had always gone back and forth between being a therapist or a counselor and just kind of got burnt out as a teacher in terms of the demands that are placed on teachers and things that really made it hard to approach students the way that I wanted to. One of the more difficult pieces was, when you had built really strong relationships with students and then they would then disclose things to you, you would immediately have to hand them off to a counselor. And I wanted to be the one that walked through those things with them after we had built this relationship. So that's what really pushed me towards deciding to become a counselor. So I went back to school, got my master's in counseling, and graduated in 2018. Worked at a group practice for a little bit and then started my own practice in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, when we realized that the mental health industry is really COVID proof because, in fact, mental health needs were increasing. So started my own practice and have been there since then. And then in 2023, I started pursuing my PhD at UNCC and I have about a year left of that program. So hoping to graduate this December. So yeah, I work with people of all ages, not just children. So my youngest client right now is 2, also working with alongside the parent as well when they're that young. And then my oldest client right now is in their 70s. So about half my caseload are kids and teens, and the other half are adults. I do a lot of work with parents. And in working with kids, I'm a child-centered play therapist. And in working with parents, I practice child-parent relationship therapy. So yeah.
Awesome. I was going to say, it's quite a jump from being a math teacher to a therapist.
Yeah.
It's not a common path into the play therapy world, I would guess.
Yeah.
Algebra, geometry, all that good stuff. And then therapist.
Right. Yeah, when I find colleagues of mine who used to be teachers, they've usually been elementary school teachers, maybe even middle school teachers, and usually if they did have to teach certain subjects, it certainly wasn't math. So yeah, it has been an interesting jump, but honestly, a lot of similarities in terms of regardless of what you teach at the end of the day, whether or not you're effective, I think depends on the relationship, which is the same in child-centered play therapy. So yeah.
I agree. And then how did you get involved with kiddos with ADHD? What made that, an area that you consider in your expertise?
Yeah, so there's really 2 reasons for that. First, I swimming in a sea of neurodivergence in my personal life. My husband has ADHD, my son, my mom, my sister, and myself. So my particular flavor of ADHD is very mild compared to the people that I love. But my husband and son's ADHD is a very big part of their life and my life on a day-to-day basis and just navigating functioning, really, and relationships, all of that kind of stuff. So that is a piece of it. But honestly, I think what even is a bigger impact on working with ADHD is actually just being a play therapist, because ADHD is the most common neurodevelopmental disorder in childhood, and even up to probably 1 in 10 approximately kids have ADHD. And so if you're a play therapist, you're gonna see it in the playroom even if you don't know how to recognize it. I guarantee you, if you're a play therapist, you have worked with children with ADHD, whether you know it or not. And oftentimes ADHD can really present in ways that you wouldn't think it's ADHD. And so you can miss it. But in being a play therapist, what I have found is that ADHD was actually at the root cause of many of the reasons why children were coming to see me. And so, sometimes when you're a counselor, you end up accidentally specializing because you have several clients on your caseload who present with an issue. And so that is a big part of why I ended up really focusing on ADHD. So kind of both my personal life and also my professional life. And yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And that's awesome. That's a lot
Yeah.
to manage, both in your personal and professional life
Yeah.
as well. That can be challenging sometimes.
It can be really challenging. It's really interesting though, because I think sometimes, when you have an overflow that is almost 100% difficult. Let's say grief, right? Let's say you have, lost somebody significant in your life and you specialize in grief, right? That's really pretty much 100% difficult. But I will say working with ADHD as a play therapist and then also as a mom and a wife of somebody with pretty severe ADHD, there's also a lot of really great things about it. People with ADHD are so much fun. Way more fun than neurotypical people, I think. We never, clients or the people in my personal life, we never run out of things to do, things to talk about, things to play. There's abounding ideas all the time. They're funny, creative, exciting, very deep feelers. And so the relationships can really run deep. So I don't know. I don't think I am sorry. I think I wouldn't change it. I kind of love it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's such a nice reframe, because I think a lot of times we look at this as, and especially when working with kids and having been in the classroom, the constant do this, do this, do this, stay on task, and how overwhelming that could feel. And so recognizing the awesomeness of who you are and the light that you bring into the space, even if it doesn't necessarily align with the social mores of the setting, doesn't mean that who you are inherently is not amazing. And I think that's part of what CCPT tries to do, right? It's just who you are is enough. And it is lovely and it is wonderful and I accept you. But it's not always the perspective that the adults around the space take.
Right. Yeah, totally. I completely agree with that. It's an interesting combination of that and also, the stress of engaging with a child with ADHD is real too. When we look at one of the things that I have been really interested in is just working with parents and supporting parents of kids with ADHD. And when you look at the stress levels of parents of children with ADHD, it is very well documented across many, many research studies for many, many years that their stress level is much higher than parents of children without ADHD. I know that's true in the research, and I also experience that in my own life, right, as the parent of a child with ADHD. So there are very real stressors and concerns that I think make parenting much more difficult, that make teaching children with ADHD more difficult, or that can make teaching children with ADHD more difficult. And so it's that at the same time as there's all these wonderful, amazing pieces of loving someone with ADHD as well. So it's such an interesting dynamic. And I think sometimes, and this is what I work with a lot of, parents on, is that sometimes the difficulties and the stress then get in the way of the wonderful things. And before you know it, you're in a cycle where the symptoms of ADHD are triggering the parenting stress, then the parenting stress is triggering the ADHD symptoms. And now we're in this cycle that gets worse and worse, and the relationship is deeply, deeply harmed. And then, going into attachment concerns and all those kind of things as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really fascinating. Chrissy, I don't want to cut you off. Were you going to?
Oh, no, go ahead.
So one of the things I was kind of anticipating as we were preparing for this to talk about working with parents later on in our next episode, but you brought it up and it seems a really great segue. And so I was kind of curious if you could speak to some of the stresses that you're seeing with parents and how do you, because I think a lot of times clinicians have reached out to us and asked us to talk about it because they're very stressed out about talking to parents about this.
Yeah.
And so maybe if you could kind of give us some insights into some of the stresses that you're seeing, and then we can go from there. Because I'm sure I'll have more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to back up one step to something that I think is really important that informs how working with parents with ADHD might be a little bit different. One is that when a child presents to counseling with a problem, we often see it in the play therapy room, right? But sometimes we don't see it in the play therapy room. And depending on the particular type of ADHD and how it presents with the child, you may or may not see it in the play therapy room for a couple of reasons. With ADHD, what we know about this diagnosis is that the presentation is highly context dependent. So, what that means is that a child with ADHD is going to have more symptoms in some contexts and less symptoms in other contexts. And so a child may, now they have to present symptoms across contexts to be diagnosed, right? That's every diagnosis. However, it's going to look different. And there are certain situations where the symptoms are going to be far less severe or far more severe. So because ADHD really involves, ADHD is not an inability to pay attention. It's a difficulty regulating attention and executive functioning skills. And so when they're in an environment, school, and they're getting excessive input, it's going to be much more difficult for their executive functioning to regulate all that input, decipher what's important to pay attention to, help with steps for deciding next action. So you're going to see more symptoms there. You may also see more symptoms depending on, family context. So a child with ADHD who has 4 siblings that may present differently than an only child with ADHD because the home environment is different. Or a child who's going back and forth between 2 homes may have more symptoms than in one consistent home, right? So there's all these different things that can affect how ADHD is presented. And one of the times that you will see less symptoms is when an adult and a child with ADHD is in a one-on-one situation, child-centered play therapy, right? So when you have a child with ADHD who's one-on-one with an adult, they have the adult's complete attention and they have ultimate choice of all the things they want to do, you're going to see less symptoms in the playroom. Now, does that mean that child-centered play therapy is not a good fit for ADHD? Absolutely not. It's a great fit for a million reasons, and we're going to get there. But understanding that it's context dependent is really important in working with parents, right? Because some parents are going to bring their child to play therapy and say, I want you to work on ADHD with my child in play therapy, but they don't necessarily want to change anything. And the most effective way to support a child with ADHD is 2 things. Number 1, in therapy, you're going to work on a lot of different things. Their self-concept, because many times children with ADHD are experiencing a lot of rejection throughout the day. In fact, 40 more times rejection than a neurotypical child. They're told no constantly. And again, as a parent with somebody with ADHD, I get it because I do have to say no a lot, right? Or set limits a lot. But they're experiencing a lot more rejection throughout the day and perceived rejection throughout the day. And so in a one-on-one session in child-centered play therapy, you're going to be working on a whole slew of things that will help a child with ADHD, becoming more self-directing, assuming greater responsibility, building their self-concept, helping them with decision-making, all of those things. And also, you need to be working with the parents regularly on adjusting how they are interacting with their child in their home environment. And also helping the parents work with the teacher, or you working with the teacher, to adjust the environment at school. In order to help a child with ADHD be most successful, there have to be changes in the environment because the presentation of ADHD is context dependent. So you can't only be doing just work in the playroom with them. So I know I've said a lot and I could continue to go on and talk forever, but I'll stop for questions or, clarification on anything.
No, I'm just curious so what types of things do you talk to parents about and what are some of the, I guess, the areas that you may regularly cover for the parent to help them better support their child, in different contexts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk about what I would do in an ideal world. So if we could wave a magic wand and the parents who have come have ultimate time and resources and capacity and all of those things, this is ideally what I would do. So I absolutely first would start with CPR. So the reason being, and I'm assuming that listeners have kind of a baseline understanding of CPRT, or you've done other episodes on CPRT kind of explaining it, I think, right? Yeah.
We're nodding our heads for those who are listening. Sorry.
Yes. Okay. So children with ADHD are at a very high risk of having an insecure attachment. because of all of the negative feedback that they get throughout the day, because their behaviors are difficult, right? And parent stress levels are very, very high. I'm not blaming parents at all. Again, I get it. It's really hard. And so the relationship often by the time parents have brought their children into therapy is very fraught. So, especially too with ADHD, you're going to see a lot of emotional dysregulation, oftentimes poor impulse control, low frustration tolerance, a lot of, in younger children, a lot of tantrums, things like that. So these things naturally chip away at the parent-child relationship over time. And so I always start with CPRT first to develop, to, reinforce that relationship. We know that CPRT reduces parent stress. We know that it helps parents feel more capable and confident. And we know that this is true across the board with presenting problems. We also know that it reduces problem behaviors. And so starting right off the bat with that, I think is really important. So that is always the first thing I do.
Can I ask you a question, Amy? Do you do
Sure.
that in a group setting, or do you do individual CPRT when you're talking about that with parents?
Yeah. So again, in an ideal world, I would have them join a group. So I run CPRT groups in the spring and the fall at my practice. And so I usually have them in one of those groups. CPRT is effective in an individual setting or in a group setting, but I do prefer it in a group setting if parents are able to do that, because I think one of the things that's most powerful about it is the support that parents get from other people in the group. And then they also are able to offer support to other parents. And so it develops this really wonderful supportive network. And I think just normalizing the difficulty. In every CPRT group that I have run, I've had multiple children with ADHD, and they haven't even been ADHD focused CPRT groups. It's just that parenting a child with ADHD is hard. And so they tend to end up in my CPRT groups. So if they're, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Amy, I also wonder if they're getting the same message their kids are getting from their communities and other places, right? Looking more problem-based than others. So having an environment, a CPRT group where they can, just even normalize their experience of parenting and really feeling seen and heard in the groups is beneficial holistically for them compared to, not that individual is ineffective, but they're not getting those same experiential messages as they are. And I mean, I have being someone who runs CPRT groups, no matter what the population is, I hear the same thing from parents. They often feel like they have done something wrong with their
Yes.
kids, right? There's a lot of blame and
So much
shame from
shame.
themselves. And so, being in a group could alleviate that. We can try as individual therapists, but I do think there's something powerful about group speak around that and group felt experiences around that where you start to realize it's not just me.
I completely agree. And, I think I talk to parents a lot too who have received such negative feedback when they get together with their extended family about their child, or from being out in public with their child, or these different things. And so I think then when you can be in a group and get positive feedback about your parenting, it's really instrumental, I think, in healing the whole family and really setting them up for success. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it seems what you're doing is, I think what's really helpful for people listening is recognizing that parents are coming in with a lot going on.
Yes.
And I think sometimes as play therapists, there's some fear that perhaps maybe, I think this is true for mental health in general, but this idea of resistant clients,
Yeah.
or they don't seem like they care about play or whatever. Let's just stop for a second and realize these parents are really having a hard time. And to reach out to a mental health professional about their child is a very difficult thing to do. And so meeting parents with that empathy, and then Amy, what I hear you saying too is that it's also an understanding of the research and the experiences that are impacting them because of this experience or diagnosis.
Yes, definitely. I think by the time parents have called a play therapist, they are, especially if their child has ADHD, they are exhausted, they're depleted, they're embarrassed, they're ashamed. You're their last call. They don't know what to do. And they've already been told that they've done it wrong by everybody. And so the very first place that you need to start in that intake is empathy. And I think to interpret any quote resistance, which I hate that word in therapy, but to interpret or see any of that through the lens of they're defeated and they're exhausted and they're scared Fear is almost always the underlying emotion of any parent in my room. They are afraid that this is not going to help, that this is not going to work, that they have ruined things.
Or that you're going to share the same message they've heard from other people, right?
Yeah.
I think that's another thing we forget when parents are willing to come in and be vulnerable with us is that, you know, maybe their anxiety or, avoidance or whatever tactic they're using in the moment to cope and stay afloat, right? Is that you're the real professional. And so if you tell them they've done something wrong,
Yeah.
right, that has so much weight. And I think we forget how much weight we carry as therapists sometimes, especially as CCPT therapists who are trying to make it more reciprocal, that we still hold a lot of weight over parents and our words have a lot of impact for them.
Yes, they really, really do. So I always start with CPRT. And I will say too, a lot of times when parents are coming in, I'm just going to plug in my laptop. When parents are coming in, they might not even know their child has ADHD, right? So they might be coming in because their child is having tantrums or behavior problems, or their emotions are just far too big for the family, or, they're getting complaints from school or things like that. Regardless, when there are behavior issues and when there is, as a result from that, there is a tension in the parent-child relationship, then I will recommend CPRT. It's good for really all kinds of parents because what CPRT really does is it equips parents both with how to understand the emotions of the child and then to communicate that they understand those emotions, and also to provide structure through limit setting and choice giving and things like that. I often find that parents are either so far on the side of, to use words that parents use, right? I'm a pushover, right? So they might be too far on the side of the emotions and the understanding and the connection, but they're really missing the structure. Or they're so far on the side of discipline and structure that there's no understanding, right? And so CPRT is really this beautiful combination of both that really equips parents for all kinds of issues. And so I always start with that. Usually what that does is it improves the relationship. It provides, these moments of joy between parent and child. The relationship is restarting. The parent ends up with a completely different perception of their child by the end. They see the behavior as communication. They understand their child's emotions better. Their stress is lower. And then what I do is I start supporting parents with making changes within the home that support the executive functioning of the child. So that might look like things such as a visual schedule. So for example, there's usually, and I usually start with whatever is the most problematic for the parent. So if the parent is talking about transitions are horrible and awful and difficult. We're all fighting in the morning, or at bedtime, he has an explosion every night at bedtime. So I'm listening because a lot of the issues are usually around transitions. Transitions are very difficult for children with ADHD. And so I will teach them specific skills that are supportive for executive functioning at home. So things like time limits, giving a time warning. So we're going to start bedtime in 10 minutes. We're going to start bedtime in 5 minutes. It's time to start bedtime. And then they also have the CPRT language around that. So I know you don't want to start bedtime, but now is the time for bedtime. You can choose to plug in your tablet, or you can choose to hand me your tablet, right? So they're interspersing these skills with the knowledge of CPRT, validating emotions, using limits, offering choices. And so then we engage the executive functioning skills. So, warnings for transitions, and then things like a visual schedule where they include their child in creating a visual schedule. All children love to be included in things and ask their opinion, right? And so, hey, I've noticed that bedtime is really stressful and sometimes we forget the order that we need to do things. So we're going to make a list. I'm going to write the word and I want you to draw a picture next to it to represent it. So, what order do we do things at bedtime? And actually writing down bathroom, brush teeth, whatever, drawing a picture, and then having that posted in the bathroom or something as a visual schedule to kind of go back to and check. So things like that, but I don't teach any of those until I do CPRT first, because there's this whole theory and underlying approach that parents learn in CPRT is that when they set limits and when they offer choices, they're not trying to force their child to comply, right? They are offering it and it truly is the child's choice. And then they know how to respond based on what the child chooses. So then when the additional skills are offered, it's all offered with the underlying framework of CPRT, which
Yeah.
is preserving the relationship. If you go straight to just these executive function interventions, the parents do not have the perspective or the underlying theory of prioritizing the relationship, of really offering the child choice, of being able to kind of detach themselves from forcing the child to do things. And so it doesn't work as effectively, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So as you were talking, I was thinking of maybe our listeners who are on the real purist side, person-centered, where
Mhm.
you're teaching skill, and I'm assuming you're doing that with parents.
Yes, I'm doing that with parents. I am not teaching children's skills
Okay.
directly. I always remain child-centered in the playroom with a child with ADHD. I think it is incredibly.
Those that are the real purists and how you manage wearing both hats, because some of what you're
Mhm.
saying feels a little more directive
Yes.
to
Mhm.
me. And then I hear, valuing the relationship and how do
Mhm.
you remedy those two hats that you wear kind of
Yeah.
with parents. And then next week, what we'll talk about is really your work with kids in the playroom and how it's different for them in the playroom.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So a couple things on that. I will say with children in the playroom, I remain child-centered always. And we'll talk about that next week and why that is and why that's I think important for all children, but especially important for children with ADHD. But in working with parents, like I said, I do always start with CPRT and go from there. And then I do provide skills after that. And I think for me, I think there's a couple of different things on that. Number one, I think the research around supporting children in their executive functioning when they have ADHD is huge, massive, right? And so I think that is a really big piece of it. I also think that equipping parents to teach their child skills is important. And so for that, I kind of have to teach parents skills as well. But again, I don't do that until the relationship is solidified, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you is that, parents are asking us for skills, first of all.
Yes,
It's
they
not
are.
like you're coming in, or it doesn't sound like you're coming in and being like, here are the 10 skills I need to teach parents.
No.
It's more of here's where we could help life at home, right? From
Mhm.
almost a behavioral
Yeah.
kind of approach, which we set behavioral goals. So it would make sense that we may focus on some behavioral techniques with parents. But it really, what you're trying to do is increase the relationship quality at home. So teaching skills helps them be able then to focus more on the relationship instead of always being behaviorally focused, which I think is historically what happens for a lot of kids with ADHD.
Yes, absolutely. It is typically the focus, which again is why I remain child-centered in the playroom. I
Mhm.
think too with parents, I don't have a set I teach parents, once I'm done with CPRT, then we teach these 5 skills for executive functioning. It never looks like that. So in my parent sessions, parents are coming in and I'm first and foremost asking how they are as people and humans, right? Because I have my own relationship with them and they're people outside of parenting. And then what I'm asking them is, how are you feeling as a parent? And I'm paying really close attention to where they're still feeling the most stressed or the most difficult area of it for them. I'm really spending a lot of time validating that, exploring that. And then I'm considering what kind of skill or problem solving could be helpful with the area that they're, having issues with. And I do that collaboratively. I'm essentially modeling what I hope eventually they will do with their child as their child grows up, right? When their child brings them a problem, they sit in the feelings and the emotions of it first, explore it, and then collaboratively work with them on what they can do. So it's very much not, here's the 10 set of executive functioning skills you need to support your child at home. I think it's highly individualized because children with ADHD are highly individual. No two people with ADHD present similarly. There's such variation in it. And so I think our approach with parents needs to be highly individual as well.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
awesome for me.
Yeah, this is really helpful, Amy. I think it's really kind of outlines your approach and how you emphasize CCPT within your relationship and the utilization of CPRT. And I just think it's really helpful.
And I think even that, you know, as we teach parents, we believe the relationship is the avenue for change. And what I'm hearing most from you is you believe that to be true with parents too. And
Oh,
that
yes.
it's really about both you building a relationship and then supporting them in building a relationship with their kiddos.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It definitely, the relationship is the most important and is the thing that creates change. And I think in creating a relationship with parents, I'm hoping to support them in fortifying their relationship with the child as well. It's a parallel process all around.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here today. We are so looking forward to continuing this conversation next week. For our listeners, thanks for hanging in there with us. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Also, if you want, you can check out our website, playtherapyspace.com. And if you have any questions or comments that you want to make to us, you're welcome to put it on whatever podcast platform you use. You can put it in the comments, but you can also send us information at info@playtherapyspace.com. Or if you want to talk to Maggie or I individually, you can send an email to Maggie@playtherapyspace.com or Kirsty@playtherapyspace.com. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Amy.
having me.
Bye, y'all.
Okay.